So today, lads, we saw a clip from the Sue Bird podcast, and I'm really disappointed. I'm really disappointed because this is a podcast, by the way, that if we're being completely honest, a big reason why people care about it is because of the current growth. Because of the current growth in the WNBA. It's not like Sue Bird's not one of the biggest names of all time. Let's be real. But the reason why you're seeing, again, Angel Reese podcast doing well, Sophie, to a much bigger extent, a Sophie Cunningham podcast killing it. And to be fair, Angel Reese everything has been from her own growth. I will have to give her credit.
The comment landed hard. On Sue Bird's podcast, a guest suggested that many new WNBA fans were watching for the wrong reasons, a remark that clearly took aim at Caitlin Clark supporters. What stood out most wasn't just the statement itself, but the lack of response from Bird and Megan Rapinoe. Their silence, paired with faint smiles, made it seem like they agreed. To many listeners, this didn't feel like casual criticism. It felt personal, as if the league's biggest star, and the growth she brought with her, was being framed as a problem. Instead of pushing back, the moment gave the impression that this divisive view was being quietly accepted, raising concerns about a growing rift within the league.
Bad things with the growth, you can blame Caitlin Clark. You're allowed to blame Caitlin Clark for the bad things, but you're not allowed credit her for the good things. And it's so disappointing to see a podcast. And whatever, Super can't control her guest. But posting this as like, it's part of the growth, we're watching it in real time. And her essentially co-signing that Caitlin Clark's everything's wrong with the WNBA. That is what I took from this comment. And that's basically what it is. It's like, oh, it was great beforehand. What about beforehand? Like, we can be real. We have to be 1,000,000% honest here. Beforehand, there was a reason why outside of the Aces and sometimes the Liberty, if you got 3,000 people at a game, it was a shock. Before Caitlin Clark. For any team. Outside.
The guest went even further, suggesting that these fans were overly focused on Clark and that she somehow didn't fit the traditional image of a WNBA player. This wasn't just a personal take. It came across as a rejection of the league's growing audience, sending a message that millions of new viewers didn't truly belong. The implication was hard to miss. Fans who followed Clark weren't real fans, and their enthusiasm was shallow or even harmful. That kind of broad judgment ignores the genuine excitement these supporters have brought and replaces it with a gatekeeping attitude that risks undermining the league's recent momentum.
If that outside of the Aces and sometimes the Liberty, if you got 3,000 people at a game, it was a shock. Before Caitlin Clark. For any team. Outside the Aces and the Liberty. And you got to give credit where credit's due for what the Aces did. And obviously the Liberty, the size, put good money into that. And also, them being based in New York helps. And having Sabrina Ionescu. But you got to give credit where credit's due to the Aces. Like, they absolutely, they were the kind of start of it all. They were the start of being, decent franchise. But let's take a listen. This is just ridiculous.
The people that are coming in and watching the sport and are fans of the sport feel like maybe they're there for...
What makes this even more troubling is where the comments were made. The podcast itself has gained far more attention because of the WNBA's recent surge, a rise driven largely by Caitlin Clark. That's the contradiction many people noticed. A platform benefiting directly from this wave of interest then allowed criticism of the very person fueling it. The original speaker pointed out that shows like Sue Bird's have grown alongside the league's expanded spotlight. Letting that criticism slide without challenge felt less like an accident and more like a betrayal of the success, now keeping those platforms relevant.
Watching the sport and are fans of the sport feel like maybe they're there for a weird reason.
This is 2025. This is 2025. I'm sorry. This is a point that you could maybe have argued early 2024. The WNBA, no offense to the players, is not culturally relevant anymore. As in, like, you are not seeing freaking every single time Caitlin Clark plays a game and it being on worldwide news anymore. Even when Caitlin Clark plays, it is not one of those things where, and this is why I always say with culturally relevant, where it's like, if you look at...
The double standard is hard to ignore. When problems or growing pains in the WNBA come up, Caitlin Clark is often the first name mentioned. But when the league's biggest wins are discussed, her role is suddenly minimized or left out altogether. She's expected to answer for every issue while rarely receiving credit for the massive jump in ratings attendance, and overall attention. That imbalance places an unfair weight on one player and lets others criticize without recognizing the impact she's had. In the end, it creates a narrative that downplays her influence while still benefiting from the spotlight she brings.
It is not one of those things where, and this is why I always say with culturally relevant, where it's like, if you look at Google Trends and the amount of people that were searching for things in the WNBA a year ago compared to now was tenfold. It was tenfold a year ago. Everything about the league, because it came at this time where, and they could absolutely be right. A year ago, it did come at a time where obviously a lot of things were politically completely divisive in America, and a lot of people used the WNBA to push those narratives. But there's a million other things that people are pushing for.
Before Caitlin Clark entered the league, most WNBA teams struggled to draw crowds of even 3,000 fans, and reaching that number was often seen as a surprise. Outside of a few markets, the league simply didn't have broad cultural visibility. That's why the guests claim that the WNBA will somehow lose cultural relevance in 2025 feels disconnected from reality. The numbers tell a very different story. Interest in the league has exploded, with online searches jumping nearly tenfold compared to the previous year. That kind of growth doesn't happen by accident. Ignoring it means ignoring the facts, and pretending the past still reflects the present. The guest also argued that last year's attention was driven mainly by political narratives, and that now those storylines have moved on. The implication was that today's fans aren't truly invested in basketball itself. But that claim falls apart when you look at what's actually happening. Viewership remains strong, even for games that don't feature Clark. Fans are still tuning in, not to push an outside agenda, but because they're enjoying the competition. That ongoing interest shows the league is building a real connection with audiences, one rooted in the game, not in temporary narratives.
Relevant things in life in the WNBA right now. The people that are still watching are fans of basketball, and to say they're there for weird reasons completely wrong. It's literally like saying, oh, you know, fans of the NBA was on tape delay 2 years ago. You know, all those fans that are here for Magic Johnson and Larry Bird, they're here for a weird reason. They weren't watching on tape delay, so it doesn't matter. Like, it's trying to make that a point. It's ridiculous.
And now they've found sort of maybe one player to hyper-fixate on that they feel stands at odds with what a WNBA player is in their minds.
And the funniest thing about this is, like, you can.
The most troubling claim was the suggestion that strong support for Caitlin Clark is actually hatred pretending to be love. That idea ignores the real excitement fans feel for her skill and influence. Calling genuine admiration something dark or dishonest is both unfair and unsupported, especially when you look at the record viewership and merchandise sales tied to her presence. It reflects a cynical view of the league's growing popularity and refuses to accept that fans have formed a real, positive connection with Clark and the game. That kind of thinking only weakens the momentum and energy now surrounding the WNBA.
People are following every move Caitlin Clark and going to watch her play golf out of hate. Like, it's fucking bullshit. And again, the fact that this is being put out as a highlight of a clip and it's not pushed back on by these hosts who are supposed to be there growing the game, and you've essentially let someone blame one person who you've had on the podcast, who you've had on your show multiple times, who gave time out of her day to show up on your show at All-Star Weekend, who, by the way, you're in charge of her Team USA and you're allowing this. This is bullshit. This is absolute bullshit.
That they want to have against the rest of the league. And we sort of had this moment where the rest of the fans had to go like, you paid the same money for your ticket, and you being here is also helpful to the sport. And that's a really difficult thing to do.
The speaker also shared a disturbing personal experience, describing how he has received real death threats from fans across different groups. These included people claiming to support Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and even the Minnesota Lynx. One incident was especially frightening, with a threat arriving while he was on his way to a WNBA Finals game, forcing him to take serious steps to protect himself. His story makes one thing clear: toxic behavior exists in every large fan base. It isn't unique to any single player's supporters. Focusing blame on Clark's fans alone ignores the wider reality of how online hostility affects sports as a whole.
Threats by Fever fans, by quote-unquote Caitlin fans. I've been given death threats by Caitlyn fans. I've been given death threats by Angel Reese fans. I've been told if I go to the Chicago Sky Arena, I'm not making it out alive. I was told going to Game 3 of the WNBA Finals last year, literally, I posted I was going to be there, and someone, again, put a threat on my life as I was on the way to the arena. I went and followed a group of people out. So that I was in a big group of people, went to an Irish bar right outside Target Center and stayed there until I could get an Uber right there because I didn't know if someone was waiting for me. That wasn't Fever fans. And I'm not good.
Talk about toxic fan bases often ignores a simple reality. Size matters. When a fan base reaches into the millions, even a tiny number of bad actors can look overwhelming. A handful of loud, negative voices can create the illusion of widespread toxicity, even if they represent a very small fraction. In smaller fan groups, similar behavior may exist, but draw far less attention. The problem is scale, not necessarily character, a detail that frequently gets lost in heated arguments. The guest also painted an overly rosy picture of the WNBA before Clark, suggesting a purer, better era that ignores years of low attendance and limited visibility. Outside of a few top teams, drawing 3,000 fans was once considered success, and the league was losing tens of millions of dollars each year. Returning to that reality wouldn't be progress. It would be a step backward. The current surge isn't a problem. It's what's keeping the league financially and culturally alive. Historically, rookies in the WNBA, especially guards, were expected to sit, no matter how decorated they were in college. That mindset limited growth and slowed the impact of new talent. Clark broke that pattern immediately, becoming one of the league's top guards right away. The fact that many analysts doubted her only highlights a deeper resistance to change, the same resistance echoed in this podcast discussion. This mindset dismisses real progress and clings to an outdated way of thinking. The idea that millions of people are watching games, even when Clark isn't on the floor, out of hatred for the WNBA, makes no sense. People don't spend hours following something they dislike. They watch because they're interested, entertained, and invested. Suggesting otherwise insults fans and twists their motivation to undermine the genuine appeal Clark has brought to the league. The disappointment runs deeper because Caitlyn Clark has been welcomed on Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe's podcast multiple times, including during All-Star Weekend. Allowing a harsh, one-sided narrative about her to go unchallenged feels like a breach of basic professionalism. This isn't about showering her with praise. It's about pushing back when criticism becomes unfair. Using a platform that Clark helped elevate to diminish her, without any balance, is troubling. Hosts have a responsibility to step in when a guest blames one person for everything wrong while refusing to credit them for anything right. That's not censorship. It's integrity. Failing to challenge that framing sends a message that it's acceptable to single out individuals and dismiss entire groups of fans. That kind of thinking risks alienating the very audience driving the WNBA's current growth and success. This kind of rhetoric hurts the sport, driving away potential fans by making them feel unwelcome. The WNBA is finally reaching a wider audience, and comments like these threaten to undo that progress, dividing rather than uniting supporters. The irony is clear. Sue Bird and Megan Rapinoe are celebrated for promoting women's sports. Yet on their own platform, they allowed a guest to push a narrative that works against growth. By not challenging claims that new fans are watching for the wrong reasons or that Clark is harmful to the league, they implicitly endorsed a gatekeeping mindset. This undermines their credibility as advocates for expanding the WNBA and raises questions about whether they truly grasp what it takes to grow the game. The issue goes beyond basketball debate. When critics dismiss Clark's fans, downplay her achievements, and blame her for systemic problems, it becomes obvious that the real target is Clark herself. It's an attempt to suppress her influence rather than celebrate the unprecedented attention she has brought to the league. This isn't constructive criticism. It's thinly veiled hostility disguised as concern for the sport. As the speaker pointed out, the percentage of toxic fans in other groups, like South Carolina supporters, is actually higher highlighting how misplaced this focus on Clark really is.